No, you can just let your attention rest gently on your breath, and if you get distracted and wander off, very gently bring yourself back to a simple focus. Okay. So we have a bit of time today and tomorrow morning to look at the general preliminary practices in Tibetan Buddhism. And what I want to do is to try to show how these can be taken up and made use of inside the general frame of the Dzogchen view. We are always viewing the world from particular positions, through particular kinds of lenses and with particular kinds of selective attention. So, for example, some people are very interested in sport, and the idea on a Saturday afternoon of being in a Buddhist centre would seem insane. They could be at a stadium, or they could be at home watching TV, watching football. And football is completely lively and vital, and what we do would be tedious in the extreme. It depends what you're looking for. Now, what we're looking for is usually based on the assumptions and habits and conditions that we have. And because of our selective attention, we go out into the world seeking experiences and situations that confirm the values that we start with. So one way of thinking of that is we're ceaselessly seeking confirmation of the validity of our own position. And if we can find some like-minded people and we all mutually massage each other, then we can feel that indeed we've got a life worth living. It's when things start to fall apart and some questions come into our capacity to maintain this particular view, particularly to realize the view in action, to find a world that fits with the shapes and assumptions in our head, that things become a bit more difficult. And views make a huge amount of difference. The people who are very busy cutting down the tropical rainforest have a view grounded in profit. They see that there is a resource there, they find ways of getting the contracts, and then they extract the wood and make money and build houses and use the money to send their children to better schools so that their children will have a better future. And inside that frame of reference, it's a very positive and meaningful thing to do. From the point of view of people who are concerned with ecology and the balance of the world's climate system, it's a disaster. And very often that's what we encounter in the world. We have a situation which one reading will show in one way and another reading will illustrate in a completely different way. At this moment in Tibet, there are very difficult times once again. The persecution coming from the Chinese government, their determined attempts to completely remove the last traces of Tibetan Buddhism are really relentless. And this is causing great suffering to many, many people. But the people who are doing this believe that they are absolutely right. They feel that the delivery of a train service into Lhasa, the development of modern education systems are bringing great benefit to the people. And they see that the monks and nuns who make great sacrifices for the Dharma are medieval obscurantists who simply want to bring the ordinary people back under their power for their own gain in terms of status and so on. So these are very different views. From the point of view of people in the West who are connected with Tibetan Buddhism, Tibet is like the mothership. It's the mother lode. It's the land from which all the lineages come, all the teachings come. It's the most precious place. And what is most precious to us is what is most obnoxious to the Chinese government. They want the Tibetan Buddhism to be emptied out from the inside so that it can be turned into a mere empty tourist attraction, a kind of Disneyland of Tibet. Well, this is based on views, isn't it? These Chinese communism, but particularly the money-making new entrepreneurs, they want an unimpeded progress on their terms. That's what a view is. It's how you see the world. And inside that view, if you're very committed to it, it's both illuminating and blinding at the same time. You become so dogmatically fixated that you know what's going on, that actually you see less and less. It's the same in the education system. As the government gets more and more directed towards checking things out, having grades, bringing in new educational models, teachers are increasingly disempowered to teach from the heart. Students have to get more and more points, building up more and more grades. And the idea of an education as a process where you move out into the world and find out who you are through participation, and educare as kind of revealing of the self, that gets forgotten. And the people who have the view from the Department of Education will be absolutely convinced that more inspection will ensure that everybody's getting a good education. This goes on all the time. So, in terms of coming to practice Tibetan Buddhism, I think it's very important that we are clear what is our view, what is our understanding of how the world is structured, and in relation to that, how meditation practice functions. Because Buddhism has been running for a very long time, and it's a system which has developed very sharp and clear systems of logic. All the various propositions have been checked for millennia now through the rigors of philosophical inquiry and through relentless meditation practice. People going on and on and on, looking again and again and again. So I think it's very helpful for us to make sure that we understand this particular reading of the world. Of course, as is stated many times in the Buddhist texts, whatever you can say is not the real Dharma. That what we talk about are methods to understand how things really are. But if we understand how things really are, we can't say anything, because it's just there. So what we're talking about is always a kind of shadow boxing. We are creating, as it were, illusions, but illusions which help us to move gradually more to a place of awakening back to our own nature. The illusions in themselves are not true. In that famous example taught by Shakyamuni Buddha, if you want to cross a river, you make use of a boat. When you get to the other side, you don't carry the boat with you. The boat is useful for its function. Each of the views in Buddhism has a function. It is a tool, a method. To become over-dogmatic about a method or a lineage or a particular loyalty is to misunderstand what it is. Dharma should be held very lightly. It's like a little wild bird that deigns to come and sit in the palm of your hand. We don't want to move too much. It's not for us to interfere with it. If a butterfly comes and lands on your shoulder, you just gaze very gently at it and you feel, how lovely, and then it goes. In a similar way, we are participating in this river of Dharma, this river of understanding, which has been flowing for a very long time. And it will never be ours if we grasp it, if we try and turn it into something solid that we have. But it will always be available to us if we keep diving into the river, if we keep bathing ourselves in these practices as ways of moving ourselves, loosening ourselves up. So, Dzogchen is a particular stream of understanding, most particularly practiced in the Nyingmapa tradition in Tibetan Buddhism. And it starts from the fundamental understanding that from the very beginning, our own nature has been completely pure. That is to say, there is nothing wrong with us. Where we get lost is we imagine that something is wrong with us, and then we spend a lot of energy trying to repair things which are not broken, trying to cure things which are not damaged. So we suffer, in a sense, from misdiagnosis. We think we are sick, we think we are bad, we think we are limited. And because we are chasing these thoughts, and these thoughts, the more we chase them, the more they lure us into the dark woods, and we become more and more frightened by our own badness. And in that badness, we then get tired and we seek compensations, which do make us actually bad and confused. And we just go round and round, and this is what samsara is. And the function of the practice is to awaken to the natural purity of existence. This is a purity which is not in a binary opposition, a dualistic opposition of good versus bad, but it is something which is truly unspeakable because it's not a concept. Most of our lives we are intoxicated by concepts. Everything we experience we put through the filter of our likes and dislikes. Some people like milk chocolate, some people like dark chocolate, some people like tea, some people like coffee, some people like Chelsea, some people like Arsenal. And inside these particular decisions, different things are illuminated. But these are just our ideas. They have the status of something which is true for me, but they don't have any truth or value outside the little circle of myself. Who is the one who is holding that view? Who is the one who says Swiss chocolate is better than Belgian chocolate? That's me. So who is this me? As I try to explore myself, different ideas arise. I can say, I am this, I am that, I was born in this place, I do this kind of work, I live in this kind of town, I wear these kind of clothes. We can describe ourselves, but what we're doing moment by moment is developing more and more concepts. We're introducing ourselves in terms of things about us, things that we are linked to. But who is the one who is speaking? In the immediacy of our being, in the immediacy of our presence, who is this one? Can you catch that? The purpose of Dzogchen practice is to awaken to the always naked nature of awareness. And inside that awareness, all sorts of patterns, memories, and associations arise. Just as if you have a strong white light and you put lenses or colored filters in front of it, when the light streams through the filter, different colors will appear. And when you see that the wall has suddenly got a red tinge on it, you think, oh, it's coming from a red light. But the light is not red. The light has a pure light, it's the filter that's red. And if you can't see the difference between the filter and the lamp, then you have a confusion. Because you keep thinking, I've got the wrong lamp. I don't want to be red. I want to be another color. I know I should be blue. The danger then is you try and smash the lamp. Difficult. Our lamp is always pure. But these obscurations stand in relation to it. Now, if you imagine that, so here we've got the lamp. It's my audio-visual aids here. Here is a lamp. Here is a filter. Now, the lamp is shining this way, so it's hitting the filter and it's coming out this side. So if you're looking on this side, what's come through the filter, that's what you will see. And the more you're fixated there, you'll never look here. You'll be looking in the wrong place. You know, as it says in many good books, by their deeds you shall know them. Is that true? By their deeds you shall know their deeds. Shall you know the person? If somebody does a bad thing, does that make them a bad person? Does it make them bad forever? Or does it show that that person has enacted a particular activity which has caused grief to themselves and others? If you steal something, you have stolen something. That is an activity. You take something and you put it in your pocket and it's not yours. And maybe the store detective grabs you and says, "Oi, what are you doing?" And so, "I didn't mean to take it." "You're a thief." "Oh, you're a thief." "No, I was just taking it." "No, you are a thief." So now we know why somebody takes things, because they are a thief. We know who they really are. Now we do this all the time to ourselves. We make mistakes, we get confused, we think we're bad, and every time we get a bit more confused, it reinforces the core belief, I am a bad person. There's something wrong with me. But actually, all that was happening was that the filter was very dirty. And the filter needed changing, like a carburetor in a car. There's nothing wrong with the lamp. Don't blame the lamp. Change the filter. And that's really what the preliminary practices are about. Learning to change the filter. You cannot change yourself, because this nature, this primordial awareness, the essence of who we are, each of us, is radiant. That is to say, we're always coming into existence, moment by moment, with this freshness and vitality. Even when we feel very depressed, we know we're depressed. There is a kind of illumination of that state. Even if we're very anxious, there is somebody being anxious. So there is a presence, but when it gets very close to its filter, it seems to merge together. And then we believe that we are this composite in which the clarity of the lamp has become invisible by being merged into its lens or filter. Does that make sense? So the key thing is, you don't have to do anything about the lamp itself. From the point of view of Dzogchen, it's recognizing this natural illumination of your own being. So in the mornings now, the starlings are starting to fly around and zoom, and you see them zipping very quickly into their little nests. In a moment when you catch something like that, or I just walked through the park and they were the last of the crocuses, and there's a sudden surprise. There's, oh, in these moments, there's just nothing much going on. There's nothing to think about. This, if you like, a pure aesthetic moment, a moment in which the openness of our capacity to receive the world and the richness of the world come together, and we get a kind of full circle. In these moments, there's a sense of who we are. We're just already full. And in that moment of fullness, you don't need anything else. And yet, the filters come back into play very quickly. And then we're tumbling around in our thoughts, hopes and fears start moving, and we think, uh-oh, I've got to correct this. It's gone wrong. Rather than finding a way of staying open and allowing all that we experience, all that we take ourselves to be, as simply the movement of energy. Because in the park, there's also paper bags. There's rubbish of various kinds. When we look at the rubbish and we think rubbish, then we think, why are people like this? Why can't they just think this is a nice public place? And the mind starts racing. Or we just look at it and we see the shape and the color. What is there? That's all there is, shape and color. It's our own mind, our interpretation that says flour good, crisp packet bad. We are doing that. So this is the energy of ourselves. And this energy is caught into a spiral of judgment. I now become the ruler of the world, and I, with great dignity and grace, ascribe value to everything I see. Dear friends, this is good and this is bad. Swiss chocolate is very good. Belgian chocolate should be banned. We do this all the time. You go into a closed store to buy something. Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. Ah. The thing you said is rubbish, someone else has bought. Should you go after them and say, excuse me, madam, I have to inform you, you have the most terrible taste. We can't do that. Because who are we? We're just another punter. We're just someone bopping along in life with our confusions. Our deep value is not based on our opinions, our judgments, our evaluation. It's based on the innate quality of the lamp, of the illuminator, which is a pure awareness which reveals everything. But we tend to imagine that we are the contents of our minds. We are our thoughts, our feelings, our memories, our intelligence, our capacities and capabilities. And so if we can make ourselves useful people, people will like us, then we'll have friends, then we'll feel good about ourselves, and we'll get a better job. Now, all of that is true, but all of that is also impermanent. Friends move away, companies close down, you become redundant, children get sick and die, parents get sick and die. All the things that we invest ourselves into and imagine will be a stable house just crumbles into sand. It's not that we shouldn't participate. We are embodied, so we have to participate in the world. But it's how we participate. If we participate with a lightness of touch, with an awareness that is open to what's arising, but not appropriating it, not grabbing it and turning it into a solid basis, because it's never solid. As the Buddha said many times, this world is like an illusion. It's like the reflection of the moon on water. That means you can see it. It's there. It's vital. It's gorgeous. But you can't have it. It's beyond appropriation. All one can do is be present and alive moment by moment. That's how you have a life. Not by planning it in your head. Not by taking things from the world and keeping them very privately. But with an open heart, participating and being with other people. So, in this view of Dzogchen, our nature is pure. That is to say, it's unobscured. Unobscured means all your thoughts, feelings, perceptions, and so on are arising for your awareness. Actually, from your awareness, but they are not who you are yourself. So, when we think, well, I'm kind of lazy, what we're doing is taking a filter, and you may well on an energetic level be a bit lazy, and you're wrapping your true sense of self in this filter. So that you're now defining yourself as being this one thing. When we say pure from the very beginning, it means no filter, no assumption, no habit actually ever touches your nature. The traditional image, as some of you will well know, used to explain this, is a mirror. The mirror reveals whatever is in front of it. Whatever is in front of the mirror seems to come into the mirror. When you look in a mirror at your own face, your face seems to be inside that mirror. And yet, when the next person looks in the mirror, their face is inside it. So, if Mary has been looking in the mirror before you, you don't have to kind of knock on the mirror and say, Mary, are you finished? Could you get out of the mirror, please? It's my turn. As soon as your face is there, Mary's is gone. Huh? This is how the mind is working. Moment after moment after moment, new experiences are arising. You were waking up this morning, cleaning your teeth, having a pee, having your breakfast, and so on. Moments coming, going, coming, going. They don't stay. You were there. This is your life, and it's gone. You're fully there. This is it. And it's not it. And it's not it. It is it, it's not it. It is it, it's not it. So, who is the one who is always there as all this stuff is going on? This is the pure unborn awareness. This is our own nature. Which means if good things come, we can only open to them. You can't grasp them. You'll never hold on to them forever. In the same way, if bad things come, they won't be with you forever. Settling into this awareness, which is at the heart of the practice, means one can be with the world as it is. Which means you can give up your full-time occupation as universal dictator. You don't have to struggle and strive to live life on your terms and make sure that everything works out right. Because you start to develop the sense that what feels right for you is just a momentary positioning. It has no more truth than an opinion. Now, this nature is fresh because just as the awareness allows each thing to arise, the moment of arising is always new. Each time you eat an apple, if you're there with that apple, that will be a new apple. But if your relation with the apple is mediated through the categorization of this is an apple, I'm eating an apple as a concept, you will hardly taste the apple. So things are familiar and repeated. If you play another game of football, it's just a game of football. But in the moment when you're chasing the ball, it is an absolutely unique moment which will never be repeated again. So part of the approach of Dzogchen is to live in the absolute freshness of each moment. Now this is something which means that there is no boredom. That may be a revelation to some people. Nothing is boring. Doing your mathematic homework is not boring. It's absolutely fresh and exciting. There's an idea. It's fresh and exciting because it's new each time. Every time you write the word the, although you've written it by now, whatever age you are, you've written it thousands and thousands of times. In this unique moment, your pen is making that mark. And it's doing it in a slightly different way. So freshness means you're not making sense of the present through the past. You're not anxiously waiting to jump into the future. You're just here as your life reveals itself moment by moment. And what could be more delightful than that? Now, of course, we don't often live in this world, the world I'm just describing. Most of the time, we're living wrapped up in our familiar thoughts and obsessions and habits. And that's why we use the preliminary practices, because they are ways of trying to thin the obscuration which stands between us and ourselves, so that we, instead of being very externally focused and trying to improve our world, our sense of self, by moving objects around, we start to simplify the matrix of interpretation, the patternings of sense-making that we apply to the world, so that we have a less mediated, a more direct relationship with what's occurring. And all the preliminary practices are concerned with purification of one kind or another. So two things are here. One is saying, from the very beginning, everything has been pure. And the second is saying, although that is the case, it is also necessary to purify that which doesn't need to be purified. Because it only doesn't need to be purified if you've got to the right side. If you're on the wrong side of the fence, it does need to be purified. That's at the heart of it. So, from the point of view of Dzogchen, we are purifying something which is already pure. Why would you bother doing that? Because you don't recognize the purity. In the same way, if somebody develops a condition, say for example, obsessional compulsive disorder, they may know that their drive, the demand they feel inside themselves to check that the door is locked or to wash their hands, they may know that that is ridiculous. They may know that they're being stupid. They may look at their hands and see how red and raw they are and despair and weep. And yet next time they feel that somehow they've been contaminated, they have to do it. That's the relationship that we have with the obscurations. Actually, the obscurations arise and pass by themselves. Everything is impermanent. Say you have a very terrible thought. I saw someone recently who is pregnant. She's got quite a good situation in the world. She's very happy. Basically everything's good. And then she thought, oh, I'll never be able to go out and get drunk again. I'm going to be a mother. This is terrible. I wish I wasn't pregnant. And then she felt incredibly guilty for thinking, how could I want not to be pregnant? That would mean my baby was dead and all I wanted to do was go out and get drunk. I'm a very bad person. And she became incredibly upset at this idea. So what was she upset about? An idea had arisen in her head. An idea that she saw was also ridiculous, that she didn't really believe in. And yet, the very fact that it had occurred was somehow terrible. But where do thoughts come from? In the old days, I would imagine in Macclesfield, in many of the streets, it would be the weekly duty and sometimes even the daily duty to go out, open your front door, take a pail of water and wash down the pavement in front of your house. And you might even whitewash the front step. So you've done that. Now some dog comes along and pisses on your step. And there's this dirty puddle. This is outrageous. It's my step, it's my job to keep it clean. But actually, your doorstep is on a public street. You want to keep something clean as if it was yours, but it's in the public domain. Is your mind your own private possession? Of course, on one level, we have to take responsibility for our thoughts and feelings. If you're sitting at work or in school and you're fidgeting and moving around, someone's going to say, boy, what's the matter? Settle down. That is to say, you as a person need to be able to control your body. You need to be able to focus your mind. So in that sense, we have to take responsibility for our behavior. But at the same time, thoughts and feelings arise inside us. Do they show us who we really are? If you have a cruel thought or a selfish thought, does that make you a bad person? That's a really, really important thing. Normally, we think it does. We imagine if other people knew the kind of thoughts I'm having, that would be so shameful. I'm very glad that people can't see inside me. So, although I appear to be quite a nice person, really I know how bad I am. So I have a lot of work to do. And also I'm always a bit frightened people are going to find out. And I would suggest that most of us live our lives in that way. Somehow, weird stuff arises in our head. We then feel contaminated by it, as if it was within our capacity to stop this stuff coming in our head. Actually, thoughts and feelings are always arising and passing. When a negative thought arises, does it define who we are? From the point of view of Dzogchen, from the point of view of the innate natural purity of the mind, it's just like a cloud arising in the sky. The cloud is just water vapor gathering together, which will then disperse itself. It starts to rain, or the wind blows, and then the cloud's gone. And the natural clarity of the sky is revealed once again. But on a day like this, if you want to go and play outside, and you look out and you see the grey sky, it's not so much fun. It seems to be doing something to you. It seems to be a limit to your world. You think, it's going to rain. You know, this is not an ideal day to go and have a picnic on the hills. It's too cold, too wet. So, just as the external weather can determine our feelings, the internal weather does the same. Some depressive thoughts, some periods of anxiety, self-hatred, irritations about what's going on at work or with colleagues, and suddenly everything gets a bit spoiled. So, from the point of view of Dzogchen, the most important thing at that moment is to relax and to be present and allow the obscurations to go free by themselves. And we'll do some of that practice a bit later. But most of the time, we find ourselves meshed in, united with these obscurations. They appear to be true. And that's why we do the preliminary practices. So, the first general practice is the 4 reflections that turn the mind from samsara. And the first of these is to reflect on the nature of samsara. Samsara is a way of thinking about how human existence fits in with other kinds of existence. And Buddhism, traditional Buddhism, follows an understanding of time which used to be very common in the world. It's cyclical time. That is to say that there are cycles of time that go round and round and round and repeat themselves again and again. So you have a kind of golden period, then a silver period, then a bronze period, and then finally a lead period where everything goes bad, and then you have a dissolution, and then you go back to a golden period. Many of the ancient Greeks believed that proposition. That means that you're not in linear time. Our modern world is devoted to a notion of progression through time, Darwinian evolution, the clock time which covers everything. A modernist cultural view is all about progress, going forward, moving ahead, doing things differently, getting away from the limitations of the past. In cyclical time, one's concerned much more with escaping from time itself. Time, which is the linking of the past, the present, and the future, is a relativization. That is to say, I'm bound in time. I once was 10. If I live long enough, I'll be 80. I'm somewhere in the middle. So I can look back, I can look forward. And there's all the things that I used to do that I don't do, and there's all the things that might lie ahead of me. So people become concerned when they're young about passing exams and working out whether they've got friends or not, and then people start to worry about whether they'll get a job or not, and then they start to worry whether they're going to have a pension or not. No, in that way, there's always something to worry about, because the mind goes forward into the future, tries to imagine the scenario, and set up the right sort of responses that will make the future better. On one level, that's very intelligent. If you're a farmer, you have to keep seed crops so that you've got something to plant the next spring. If you eat all your seed, then what will you do in the spring? You have to be able to think ahead. However, cyclical time means that whatever is built up will also go down. Whatever is created will be destroyed. There used to be the great and glorious British Empire, where in the map of the world there was always something red in colour. And now here we are, still called Great Britain, but not so very great somehow. A little bit sinking. We reveal ourselves as just another warmongering nation, very concerned to go out and drop bombs on other people. We, in fact, Britain has a shameful history. We're one of the most violent, invasive, corrupting influences in world history, in this determination to show the world what we are made of and to help other people be like us because we're so superior. And where's it all gone? Endless chaos created by disturbing other people's worlds. This is the idea of modernity, that if you have the truth, you have to take it out into the world and convert other people to that vision of existence. But from a Buddhist point of view, it's much more important to examine your own mind. Because when you realize that your mind is not very clear, on what grounds would you want to go and convert other people to your propositions? dogma is very dangerous, because dogma is a set of beliefs or assumptions which seem to tell the truth. But when you start to meditate and look at your mind, you see every thought arises and passes. And it's only by repetition of the dogma that it appears to be true. So if you become dogmatic, all you're doing is repeating thoughts again and again to kind of mesmerize yourself, to hypnotize yourself into believing that they're really true. But they always, I think this is true, dogmas are always lies, because our world is incredibly complicated. The Buddha taught the idea of dependent co-origination, which means that everything influences everything else. That there are these incredibly subtle chains of connection between all our activities all the time. And that's very, very nuanced, very, very delicate. But dogma is not like that. Dogma is firm, dogma is secure, dogma is certain. So one of the functions of meditation is to make us non-dogmatic, so that we start to inquire into how is the world. So a notion of cyclical time, that at this time we're born in a human body, but we also see that there are animals in the world, and maybe when we die we could be reborn as an animal. There's a painting on the wall here on this side which shows the 6 realms. That on the top there is the heavenly domains, and then there are the jealous gods who want to be the masters of heaven but never get there, so they're always angry and frustrated and irritated. Then there's the human realm, then the animal realm, then the hungry ghosts who are always dissatisfied. Their bellies are huge and their mouths are very small, so they can never get enough. And then there are the hell realms. Hot hells, cold hells, 2 intermediate hells, in which people suffer greatly without solace. You can understand these in psychological terms, or you can see them in actual terms. But one of the things that it's pointing out is, at the moment you take your body to be the limit of who you are. And most of us don't really imagine that we could be a duck or a frog. But imagine if you were a frog. There's lots of birds that would like to eat you. Why would they like to eat you? Leave me alone. Go away. And the problem is, you want to get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, so you have to go quack, quack. But when you go quack, quack to get sex, death also comes to visit. This is a human dilemma. The life of animals is not very nice. If you're born as a pig or a cow, you probably belong to a farmer. And the farmer is thinking, my lovely prophet. My prophet, going to send you off to have your throat cut. Not very nice. Animals can't do very much to protect themselves. You just need to see a little sparrow eating and just hop, 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 looking around completely paranoid. Somebody's going to eat it. Too damn right. There are lots of cats. But most of the cats here that I've seen in Macclesfield are so fat because everybody feeds them Felix and all these tin things. So in fact, that's quite nice for protecting birds. The life of animals is not very nice. Then you imagine being a preta, a hungry ghost. Always hungry, always needing something, and you can't get it. From the Buddhist point of view, these are possibilities. That is to say, your current form is created out of your past deeds. You're not just human. Here we are on this planet, moving through space. We don't know why we're here. We happen to be here. Later we'll die, and that's that. This is a kind of modern view of human life. From a Buddhist point of view, our existence is determined by the karmic fruits of our past activity. That is to say, the universe is moral. At the heart of it, it's a moral universe. And the forms that we take on demonstrate the nature of our past activities. But because actions exist in time, the causal basis for having this kind of body is very small and will get used up. And then our consciousness will move off and find another home. And many of the homes that are available are not very nice. That immediately means that if I spend the whole of this life making sure that this lovely body is pampered and safe, I may be doing things to make it safe, which lead me into dreadful places later. The Buddha said, everywhere human beings want to be happy, but in order to be happy, they do the very things that will make them unhappy. So, traditionally it's said, if you steal, you will be reborn in a country where there's a lot of poverty and famine. Now, if that is the case, then in order to have a good time in this life, you don't think of cause and effect, you just think of getting away with it. And as long as the police don't find out what I've done, I'm safe. But what you've done is set in chain a natural system of punishment. You don't need the police to punish you. You'll get your own comeuppance, because the comeuppance is your own karmic tendency in a later life that will lead you to be born in a particular circumstance. This has major implications. I mean, whether this is true or not true, if you just took this as a kind of map of existence, what it calls us upon to do is to be very careful about what we do. To think, what is my motive? Why do I do what I do? How am I spending my time? From a Buddhist point of view, wisdom and compassion are the two main things to be developed. So in the course of a day, how much of your time is devoted to developing wisdom? Can you live in a state of wisdom? Wisdom meaning to recognize your own nature, to recognize the nature of the phenomena around you. Can you live with compassion? So, if you're in a work situation, what would it mean to be compassionate? Does that mean giving in to other people? Does that mean standing up for yourself? The practice is always complicated. It doesn't come from a little printed handout. You know, when you're in the actual interface with other people, you've got to be there. You've got to be light on your feet. You've got to be able to catch your impulses as they arrive. You've got to catch the filters that come down to obscure you and get you caught up in habitual responses, and stay fresh and find a way through. That's quite hard, especially if we're thinking anything for an easy life. What about me? And why shouldn't I? And it's not fair. And all these little turns that we have which bring our attention back onto number one. So reflecting on these 6 realms and the fact that at death we move around into different realms helps to relativize our current situation, rather than thinking this is all there is. I've only got one life and I've got to get the most out of it, as if one was kind of sort of juicer and you were squeezing oranges onto it. This is life. I want the most. What is it for? What is the purpose of my life? That again is my life personal, or is my life public? Because if I'm part of the world with other people, then in a sense my life belongs to other people as well. So compassion is just me being in my world. Because if other people are my world, given that I see your faces, I don't see mine. So if I'm doing things that make me happy but make you all pissed off, all I see is your grumpy faces. That's my world. So it makes sense to try to make other people a bit happy, because they are your world. That's all you've got. That's quite a different thing then, isn't it? So the way I should take care of myself is to take care of other people. Taking care of other people is taking care of myself. That's a very different view. Your welfare is my welfare. It's not that I have to think, how will I help you? And I better sort my own situation out and make sure I'm secure before I do anything for you. Rather, it's the other way around, that unless you're happy, I can't be happy. Therefore, what I do with my life is connected with all the possibilities of existence. And this wheel of life, I think, is extremely challenging. Because if this had been understood at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we wouldn't have had the development of modern factories, which were hellish environments which enslave many people. And all over the world now, we have child labor in factories making running shoes and so on. Hot, sweaty environments with lots of chemicals in the air. Also pumping out masses of pollution into the rivers. So many developing countries have enormous pollution. Now, if you think, this is all my world, the animals are part of my world, then for me to make a profit from my factory while poisoning lots of fish and birds is attacking myself. If we have this kind of map. But if we have the map of narrow self-interest, it doesn't concern me. As long as I'm okay, that's fine. So reflecting on samsara is a way of reorienting oneself to say, I am part of this, and every aspect of the universe is my concern. I can't have a partial vision anymore. Privileging me over other people won't do me any good. Now, of course, this is a very high ideal to live up to. It's very challenging to think in that way. But essentially, that's what reflecting on samsara is. That the situation that I'm going to do so much to protect now is arising out of many past causes and won't last forever. Therefore, not to see my connection with other beings will lead me into many false choices. But seeing my connection to other beings will give me a value system which is very different from the ones that we get raised in at school. From that point of view, a concern with ecology is just ordinary ethics. For example, in Tibet, people were traditionally very careful about taking minerals out of the land because they saw the land belongs to the protectors of the land, many different spirits. The water belonged to another group of spirits. These Lu or Nagas were very concerned with purity. So if you polluted a river, you would have an anxiety that you would develop a condition like measles or leprosy, because skin disorders in particular were seen as the punishment from the protectors of the water for people who dumped their rubbish in them. That's an incredible idea. It takes the sort of Gaia hypothesis quite a few steps further. It says that the earth is not just a living organism, but it's alive and has voices, and that if you are respectful, if you know that people are already there, then you have to be tentative. So if you want to build a house, the first thing you have to do is make some offerings to the spirit of the land to say, may we have your permission to build here? And we promise we will make these offerings, and we will remember you, and we will always be grateful because our house is built on your land. What an incredible notion. When the explorers went out from Europe, the conquistador and the British and the Dutch and Spanish and so on, they didn't have that notion at all. They had the notion every land is empty if it doesn't have Europeans in it. Nobody else exists. Nobody else exists. We can take all your land, we can kill you, because we are the definition of reality. Everything else is just nothing. And we are going to turn that nothing into something. This is a spectacular karmic violence to have enacted. It's unbelievable. You know, in one of the states of Australia, it was only in 1956 that they revoked a law that said you can kill Aborigines for recreational purposes. You could drive out in your Land Rover and shoot an Aborigine. for fun. 1956. This is mind-boggling. The lack of respect for each other among humans, for animals, and for the whole planet. So, thinking of samsara is a way of waking up to the fact that everything is dynamic, everything is movement, and every move we make is impinging on this whole energetic system. The challenge in that is you have to be awake. You can't just be bopping down the street asleep and just listening to your sound. You know, cocooned in a private world, because this is your world and you're impacting other people. So that's quite a remarkable vision. And so one of these, the first preparatory practice is to really think, what is this universe? If it's an interactive, energetic field, then I have to experience myself as energy. Not as an entity, not as a thing, not as a done deal, something which is already established, but as a naked, evolving, revelatory force moving with other force factors. Well, maybe we need a wee cup of tea after that. Shall we have a break? If you imagine up in the sky, the sun is always shining, but sometimes it's obscured by clouds, and then sometimes rain's falling from the clouds. So some of the Dharma practices we do are to develop an umbrella. So you can hold the umbrella up, and the rain of your own obscurations won't make you wet. Yeah? That's generally what's called the Hinayana view, of trying to protect yourself from the potential difficulties and dangers that are in the world. The problem with an umbrella is that you have to hold it up. If you forget to hold it up, you will get wet. And so in the Hinayana tradition, they have a lot of vows, because vows are ways of remembering your umbrella. What to do when this happens, what to do when that happens, so that you always are attentive. It is a very dualistic vision. If I am not careful, if I am not attentive, bad things will happen. It is all up to me, but of course my capacity to be on the ball all the time is not great. So it's a very difficult task. The next level is to look at these clouds and to think, how can we thin out these obscurations? So that's where the purification practices come in. We develop positive qualities, courage, endurance, patience, compassion, wisdom, and so on. And the more we do that, because we're devoting our time to doing that, the less we are encouraging and maintaining our more negative qualities of selfishness, irritation, and so on. If you keep doing that, gradually, slowly, the band of obscurations will become thinner and thinner. So this is something that you get in the Hinayana path, but also in the Mahayana path, where you make a commitment that over many, many lifetimes you will work to thin away these obscurations. And the motivation is not just that you will have an easier time, that by removing the obscurations of all beings, everyone will have an easier time. Again, the focus is still dualistic. There is me and my obscurations. And they are an obstacle or an interruption to me going to where I want to go. The third aspect in this image is the sun. The sun is represents the radiance of awareness itself. So when we practice in the Dzogchen tradition, we enter the heart of the sun. Our own mind is the illuminating force of the sun itself. So we're not obscured from the sun, we become the sun. And from the position of this radiant awareness, everything that arises is simply the revelation of the capacity of the sun. So there are no obscurations. And this is the practice that we'll do now. And the function of the practice is that whenever thoughts, feelings, sensations arise, that you can start to wrap yourself around or pull into a familiar story you have about yourself. You just relax and allow whatever comes to come. Don't edit, don't protect. Part of the profound fear that we have is, I will be contaminated by this experience. What is it that gets contaminated? Well, clearly our personality will be influenced by what happens to us. If you grow up in a family where there's a lot of cruelty, a lot of criticism, physical, sexual abuse and so on, your pathway in life will definitely be affected by that. When we say your pathway, what does that mean? It means your personality, the patterning of your energy in terms of how you relate to yourself and how you relate to other people. Is the mind itself affected by all these experiences? From the point of view of Dzogchen, it's not. It doesn't matter what your history is, if it's good or it's bad. If you stay in a state of awareness and just observe what is arising, it will come and it will go. Say, for example, you grew up in a very, very critical family and your inner world is full of criticism and judgment. You're very harsh on yourself. And you sort of, you might say, you beat yourself up. So there's a negative thought, and there seems to be a recipient of that negative thought. Oh, no, why do I keep doing this? Oh, I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. Now, if I'm saying I'm so stupid, the one that's saying that is the I'm. So I'm the attacking force, but I also seem to be simultaneously the recipient of it. So I'm whacking myself. If you just sit and something like that arises, it's then gone. Both polarities go. The attacking polarity and the attack polarity will both vanish. If you fuse into it, if you think this is a true account of how I am indeed a waste of space, this negative thought is telling me the truth about myself, then you will become limited, conditioned, and defined. And then whatever thought arises in your mind will be your master. So if you have the bad luck to have lots of very negative thoughts, you will just be flattened and annihilated. And as we know, every year many people kill themselves. They come to a point where they feel the content of my mind is so overwhelming and the strength of my impulses is so intense and my arousal is so profound that I can't self-soothe, I can't bring myself down, that when these three factors meet together, the only way forward is out. This is so tragic. It's tragic because this life is gone, but from a Buddhist point of view, it means that you move off into the next experience with a very powerful sense of being at the mercy of whatever arises. From the point of view of Dzogchen, whenever you find yourself falling into your thoughts, believing your thoughts, relax, observe, and very gently pull your attention back from the thought so that you stand still like the mirror and let the thought pass. Thoughts will always pass. They have no inherent power. You give them the power. You give them the power. but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like the power is in the thought. So this is the heart of the meditation practice. So we do a little bit of that just now. Some of you know this rather well. Just sitting in a relaxed way. Let your spine carry your weight so that your muscles can hang free and your skeleton is just supporting all your weight. And in this kind of practice, we have our chin slightly raised and we rest our gaze in the space in front of us. And what we want to do is to integrate the space inside ourselves, our natural freedom, our openness, with the space outside, so that we experience ourselves in this environment with the arising of everything in space, just arising and passing, arising and passing. And we integrate with our own nature this unborn state of awareness, which is not anything and yet which reveals everything. It's because the mirror has no content of its own that it can show everything that's put in front of it. When we identify with a particular content of our own, that clutter of furniture inside ourselves stops us offering hospitality to everything that arises. This building here that you see was once just a kind of empty shell. In that empty shell you could do anything. But now it is a Buddhist centre. And so one must act with a certain decorum. It wouldn't be nice to do certain activities in this room. That's what happens when you get furniture. It determines the space. So all the furniture that you built up from past lives and from this life, all the traits of your personality, your beliefs, your hopes of fears, your likes and dislikes, you imagine what a clutter of stuff you've got inside yourself. And so when you encounter new experience, it's all being mediated through all this stuff. So in this practice we want to just let go of the stuff. Empty room, and then everything's possible. So we sit in this way, and then we make this sound of ah 3 times, just releasing all the tension and attachment in ourselves into the space and integrate with the space that's in front of us. Okay, so we try this, and then when we finish that, we just sit in that state of openness, and whatever happens, whether it's very familiar or very unusual, just stay relaxed and let it come and go. If you enter into judgment and think, oh, this is stupid, or I don't like this, then you're already caught up in the thought. If that happens, just relax. You can relax into a long out breath and let the thought go and see what's there, and see what's there. Now clearly, although that practice is very simple, it's quite difficult to do. And one of the things it does, certainly in the beginning stages, is it reveals to us just how easily our attention fuses into whatever's arising. And when your attention goes into the object, that is to say, what's occurring, there's a kind of synergy that builds up between the two. It generates a kind of energy. So the fusion of subject and object, their strong interaction, creates the felt sense of this is me. You get caught up in a chain of thought. It feels like me, and it seems to be telling the truth about me. If one is practicing purely in the Dzogchen mode, he would simply go back into the practice again and again and again. But what we can do is take that view of our own nature as pure and open and integrate it with the preliminary practices, so that we're using the purification of what's arising to help make the object lighter, more transparent, so that there's less hooks, as it were, on their side and less hooks on the subject side. And then the self-liberation of phenomena becomes easier to experience. So, back to these basic principle thoughts. The second one to think about is karma. That everything is created by karma. Karma simply means activity. But it means a particular kind of activity. And so, I'll just unpack this a little bit. Some of you are familiar with this, but it's very important to see the basis of it. Traditionally, it's understood in terms of 4 aspects. The first is the basis. And the basis of the generation of karma is to believe that I exist as a separate person. It's called the ground, but here meaning the relative ground. So, I'm me, and I'm looking out of my eyes at you. I'm real and you are real. When this is installed, then you have the potential for karma. Am I real? Not really. What is the basis for my reality? My name. I am James, and I also have a passport to prove it. So if I don't know who I am, I can look in my passport. There's my picture, my name, that's me. Am I reliable? Not at all. Would I want to be reliable? Well, sometimes. But the reality is, thoughts, feelings, sensations change. The content of me being me varies a great deal. It varies according to the season, to hormones, to all sorts of factors bring about different constellations of what I call me. From a psychological point of view, more and more there's an understanding that we have different aspects of ourselves inside, sometimes called subpersonalities, self-states, voices, that we are made up of a congregation and interplay of different aspects, none of which are enduring or inherently true, but they move together. So, for example, in a football team, you have people who take up particular positions. And while the game is going on, they make moves in accordance with the particular role that goes with that position. At the end of the game, they are no longer doing what they did in the game. The goalkeeper is not jumping about as he walks down the street. He's just walking down the street. So being the goalkeeper is a situational identity. It's very important in football to have a goalkeeper. But in the same way, inside ourselves as a person, it's important to have a bit of us that's got some teeth to it. Because if you can't bite, in some situations that's a bit dangerous. It's important also to be kind and generous. Of course, we often get trapped in being placatory as well. So many of the positions that we take up are not so helpful, and they need to be balanced by other helpful things. It's very rare to have a football team where each of the positions in the team is occupied by somebody who's really good at that position, and not only that, understands the position of the other players. So somebody may be fantastic as a star, but they never want to pass the ball, which means they're not a team player. To become a good team as a person is very difficult. because we tend to be divided against ourselves. We don't even want some of the members of our team to be in our team, so we're all trying to send them off. So not only are we a bad, malfunctioning team, but we're the referee as well. So in that situation, we are a bit divided against ourselves. And yet, I exist, I'm real, I'm true. So we've got this double move. We can see that actually we're rather incoherent, we're rather situational in how we present ourselves, and yet we're quite strident in protecting our integrity, so-called. So this is the first stage of karma, thinking I exist as I, me, myself. I am someone. On the basis of that, I'm positioned in the world and I have intentions. My intention is to protect myself. My intention is to develop myself. My intention might also be to protect you. But say I'm going to do something kind. I want to help you. I am real, you are real, and the help I'm going to give is real. So then I think how I'm going to do that. The third stage is the actual enactment. It's called jorwa. It means joining your intention to the actual situation in which you do whatever it is. And then the fourth stage is the outcome, in which you think, I did that, I'm glad I did that, that was a good thing to do. So when these four factors are fully aligned, then you get the full weight of karma. That is to say, you've put your full energy in one direction, you've committed yourself to a particular formation in the world, and therefore you're likely to re-encounter that formation coming again. You know, if you, say for example, you've stopped smoking for a while, and then you get upset about something, or you drink a bit much at a party and you have a cigarette. In that moment, you might enjoy the cigarette. Now afterwards you might think, oh, what am I doing? This is stupid. In which case, you've blocked it on the fourth level, on the level of the outcome. You said, I don't like that outcome. But already you've set up a bit of a tendency. You want to have another cigarette. Do I really want to have this cigarette? Well, part of me does and part of me doesn't. This is the problem with being in duality. Because we are divided against ourselves, the task of self-management is very, very hard. This is why paths based on vows are very difficult. The person who takes the vow and wants to be a good monk or nun, or really wants to be a bodhisattva, is not the whole person. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand does. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand does. That's the problem. If only we were all of a piece, we could speak our truth and be reliable. But because we are polyvocal, because we live in this polyphony of different voices, which is often a cacophony because we're divided against ourselves, we can't really be quite sure when we say something if we'll carry it through, because whose voice is this? It's my voice, and yet I have other voices that disagree with it. So, karma means that we're often carrying through activities without much insight to what we do, bumping into the world, which has its own small consequences, but the key thing is that the structure of self and other as separate and strongly real is always being installed. And this is very important, because in the view of Buddhism, good actions are not enough. Even if you manage to be a very, very, very good person, and you never cause any trouble, and you are always kind and gentle and thoughtful, that would not be sufficient for awakening. Because the self-referential nature of our activity, knowing what we do, not in an egotistical sense, not taking big pride out of it, but just knowing, I did that. The way in which every time you do something, like if I lift the cup, I'm just lifting it, but there's a sort of invisible feedback loop that says, I have lifted this cup. So there's an affirmation, a confirmation of my existence. I am the agent. I am the one who is doing this. And that solidity of the individual self, me as an autonomous subject separated from the environment, that's what's the basis of the problem. Because that is the nature of ignorance, to take oneself as separated from the integration of spaciousness and manifestation. And to then see, I exist in relation to the world, and I can choose to participate or not. So now I'm going to be a good person, and I choose to participate in a good, helpful, kind way, but I'm still confirming my separate existence. And from the Buddhist point of view, that is ignorance. It's not seeing how it actually is. So, karma is the seed of being born in the different realms, and you can read elaborate rationales for why different realms are created. But the root cause is not recognizing one's own unborn nature, or Buddha nature. So, karma means, if I don't waken up to the fact that my nature is open, unborn, spacious, a luminous awareness, and if I continue to see myself as a finite personality created out of causes and conditions, I will always be trying to protect myself and interacting, pushing away what I think is bad, trying to pull in what is good. And that energy will drive me round and round in these 6 realms. So the path to liberation doesn't lie in activity, it lies in awakening to the ground out of which activity arises. This is why an understanding of karma is very important. Of course, the Buddhas also do things. They help people, but they help them in the manner of a dream. Sometimes that's explained in terms of the Buddhas live in their pure lands, like Amitabha in the western paradise of Sukhavati. Amitabha is always there, but out of him radiate rays of rainbow-colored light, and many beneficial forms come into the world. What that means is that he is not doing it. That is to say, activity is spontaneous. Now, of course, if you're driving a car, you have to take responsibility to stay on the right side of the road and overtake carefully. You can't just let it happen. And in that situation, it's normal to have a sense of being the agent. But when we sit in meditation, the more you relax, the more you realize stuff is just happening. You are not the thinker of the thought. The thought arises, and if you're relaxed, there is simply this open field of awareness which reveals the thought. So your mind is then like the stage, and on this stage, dancers, performers of many kinds come and go, and then they're gone. The stage doesn't create the dancer. It's not doing the dancing. The stage is simply the environment in which that occurs. It facilitates it. Without the stage, the dancing wouldn't be occurring there, but the stage itself is not dancing. So this is very important. This is the understanding of the dreamlike or illusory nature of the Buddha's activity. It's said to be in the manner of a dream, like a rainbow, like a mirage. It's there, and yet it's ungraspable. What gets in the way of our recognizing that is that we grasp at ourselves all the time. We think we're strongly real. We take our pains and sufferings very seriously. In fact, they just pass. It's normal to suffer. Suffering is what we get here. There's a lot of it about. So when we get it, it's kind of, yeah, that's What do you expect? This is Macclesfield weather. We are not in the tropics. This is it. This is what you get here. Why would we be surprised? So karma is enormously important as a way of thinking about who is the one who is doing this action. Being more alert, because our tendency is to be sucked into the world of objects. Because the object is there, I feel that I have to. I feel I have to. Why did you need to climb Mount Everest? Because it's there. You know what human beings do. Why do you invade this other country? Because it's there. Because we can. We human beings are very, very stupid. We do things just because we can do them. It's ridiculous. But why? Why would you want to do that? Because I can. Yeah, but why? No, because I can. This is a completely circular argument, isn't it? It has no rationale in it at all. You know, Britain is going to defeat the Taliban. The Taliban have these old Russian weapons. The Americans are being called in with their big bombers. There's our holy prince calling in, you know, blow them up, blow them up, blow them up. Yeah, blown up, well done. A hero. My country, right or wrong. Is that a fair fight? No, not a fair fight. Do you want war to be a fair fight? No, because if it was a fair fight, we would die. Let's have an unfair fight. That feels better, doesn't it? We are going to bring democracy, truth and justice to a country by fighting unfairly and demonstrating to them might is right. We're going to use all our firepower, all our guns to show them we can crush you to death in the name of democracy, which is respectful of each human being's right to exist. Human beings are very, very stupid in that. And that's the danger of karma. In thinking that you're doing something good inside one little frame of reference, you end up creating a lot of turmoil. So Buddhists sit on their cushions and try not to do too much. And that may be a better hope for the world. So, next factor is impermanence. Impermanence is very, very important to understand. Everything is impermanent. Moment by moment by moment, the world changes. We've been sitting in this room for some time. We haven't had an earthquake, so we might believe this room is a fairly stable environment. It's only stable in terms of its concept. The concept of the room won't change because we can keep repeating it. But as the day changes, the light coming in the windows affects the coloration that we have in here. As the air gets more stale, we get more sleepy, and so our perception of the world changes. That's what happens, isn't it? The room as revealed to us is changing moment by moment. The room that we conceptualize and think about can remain the same. All the stability in our life is conceptual. All the change in our life is experiential. So the Buddha's teaching on impermanence is to bring us away from the pseudo-security and fixity and sense of control that comes from resting on concepts into the immediacy of the fact that it's changing suddenly. Because you're sitting in your chair and you just move slightly and you've got a new room. You just tilt your head a little bit, you have a new room, you have a new perspective, you see people's faces from a different angle. Oh, but that's still John. What is there? It's a particular profile. The light at this time, how the person's expression is revealed, that is this. That's what you've got. As soon as you say, ah yes, but it's John, you've lost the detail of that face and you've reassured yourself on the basis of saying, I trust the name, I don't trust the experience. I prefer concepts to experience. That's an amazing thing to do. Because actually we live in a world of experience. Sparrows don't trust concepts at all. They're very wary of cats. You know, they're checking it out. They're in a world which is completely naked. Now we have managed to use concepts to make our world much safer. We have things like insurance policies, which are very useful to have. But it's mediating raw, direct experience through contracts. You have a contract of employment. If somebody gives you a bad deal, you can go and take them to arbitration. You can take them to an inquiry. You can say, this is not right. This is how it should be. What about that? But if you've ever done a process like that, you'll find out it's awful. Because the realm of bureaucracy is just trading one term against another. That's what our whole legal system is. You know, if you have to write a court report for a patient who's going into the legal system about child benefit or child care, it's very, very political, isn't it? Because you're simply telling a story. How can you say whether someone would be a good mother or not? So, impermanence is a call back from the mediation of conceptualization to the directness of experience, which includes concepts. That's the whole thing. Concepts are not outside of experience, they are a part of experience, but they've taken on a privileged position which seems to set them apart as the judges of experience. Does that make sense? So when you speak, when you have a thought, it's gone. It's gone. Oh. There's the impermanence of the concept. Now the concept says, I remain, I'm true. This is Macclesfield. This is Macclesfield. It was Macclesfield on Monday, it's Macclesfield on Saturday. It's always Macclesfield. But where is Macclesfield? You can't find Macclesfield. You can find it on a map because you look for the word Macclesfield. Oh, there it is, near Manchester. But when you walk around in the streets of Macclesfield, where's the heart of Macclesfield? Oh, this is the oldest part of Macclesfield. This is the oldest house in Macclesfield. Oh, that's the real Macclesfield. It's not like that, is it? Macclesfield is ungraspable because it's always changing. And yet the concept can be applied again and again. So impermanence allows us to see how we bring ignorance into the world, how we concretize situations which are actually dynamic. You know, oh, I'm going to see Swan Lake tonight. So we have Swan Lake, we have a notion of the music, we have a notion of the standard choreography. And so you get an interpretation, and afterwards the critic can say, that was not an impressive performance. Da, 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 da. Because they have in their mind what the ideal performance is. But all you ever get in Swan Lake is a beginning, a middle and an end. And then it's gone. And it was ungraspable all the way through. And how will you receive Swan Lake? If you're the critic, you know that you've got to write something for the newspaper. And you want to keep your job, so you have to say something interesting. So a little bit of sharpness in your eyes looking out. You're looking for things. The child going to Swan Lake for the first time. Imagine a little girl of 7. You know, dressed up, she's got a little bow on her dress. That's a very different Swan Lake, isn't it? No agenda, just oh, so beautiful. Tears coming down. That's very sweet. So it's very, very important for us to see what is impermanence. Nothing to grasp. And if there is nothing to grasp, then in life either we're there or we're dead. And we are the zombie nation. Most of the time we're asleep. We're just bopping around in our heads thinking about this and that. Not here, somewhere else. So impermanence is saying, attend in the moment, attend in the moment, attend in the moment. There is nowhere to hide. Because if you link impermanence to karma, while you're in a daydream, your activity construction is still going on. You are doing things without being aware of them, but that doesn't stop them having consequences. And these consequences, because you're in the world of concepts, seem very strong. When you take concepts to be real, then when you come to think about what you did, you get the strong response. Oh God, why did I do it? I shouldn't have done it. And you feel it in your body, and you tense up, the muscles tense, the diaphragm squeezes, the breath comes up. Oh, what will I do now? It's very intense. Of what's causing all that? It's not the action's already gone. The self-attack is conceptual. The moment of the event is gone. You have created a mental construct, and you are now standing in relation to the construct and linking it to your value system, which you'd forgotten about when you did the action, but you suddenly remember it. And now these three factors are grinding together. This is an intrapsychic conceptual battle. And in that you get a lot of grief. That's what a great deal of suffering is. Buddhist suffering, which is the next factor, means the way in which the momentary evanescent pain of situations is cooked up to become something else. It's normal for us to get aches and pains. You get a headache or a backache. This is not suffering from the general Buddhist point of view. Suffering is when you feel yourself to be the victim of that pain. It's not fair, it shouldn't be happening, why is it happening to me, I hate this. These are the sources of suffering. Because you're then not allowing this factor to be part of the total sphere of your activity. It's just one of the many things that's going on. But you're now getting closer and closer to it, obsessed, mesmerized by it. And it's determining who you are. And when an event determines who we are, that's the real basis for suffering. Do you think that's true? So freedom from suffering doesn't mean that everything is ha 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 all the time. What it does mean is that things are just as they are. Some days are happy, some days are sad. When you're sad, you can just be sad. Being sad is not the same as suffering. Suffering is when you feel you shouldn't be sad. When it's not something you can occupy. If you inhabit your own existence, every experience will be impermanent, so it will pass. Really understanding the impermanence of phenomena and the natural purity and spaciousness of the mind, you don't have to be upset. But I don't want it to be like this. Bad luck. Life is like that. Prince Harry wanted to stay in Afghanistan. Bad luck. No matter how rich and powerful you are, things don't go well. Suffering comes to everyone. That's just a fact. But I don't want it to be this way. Now, what's the cause of suffering? Is it the fact of difficult events happening, or I don't want it to be this way? From a Buddhist point of view, it's the latter. That's where the suffering is. Because now I'm standing in relation to my experience, and I want to change it, and I can't. So I feel small and stupid and despairing. I feel ashamed and I feel angry. Why won't you? And it's all cooked up, and you feel tight inside, you stop breathing properly, and all kind of revenge fantasies or despairing fantasies arise. And this is suffering. Being immersed in something which has already gone. And this is linked to old age, sickness and death. This body, which if we're lucky is healthy for quite a bit of our lives, so for many people it's not very healthy, maybe a great source of pain. If you're lucky and you have a longish life, sooner or later sickness starts to come, the body starts to wear out, the cartilage and so on gets thin, the skin gets thin, the body bruises easily and so on. And then we move towards death. And death means that we are having to leave all the things that were close to us. All the things that we thought were ours, whether that's family, possessions, knowledge, all the ordinary basis of my identity. You know, it's very easy to explore this. You just think of how you would introduce yourself to someone you meet for the first time. You start to tell them something about yourself. Everything that you tell them about yourself will go when you die. just your body that dies, it's your identity that dies. So in the Tibetan tradition, the elements which make up the body start to dissolve, the earth into the water into the fire into the wind, and finally our consciousness is merged in the wind element, and it leaves the body through one of its 9 doors and goes off on a journey. And the first thing it experiences is this open spaciousness, the dharmata, the chunyi. And in that moment, if you've done open meditation and relaxed, you can just recognize, oh, this is familiar, and just stay in that. Then you have liberation in the Dharmakaya. That moment passes, and then you start to encounter color and noise, which comes in the form of, first of all, the peaceful gods, and then the wrathful deities. And if you've done some practice and you can be with that, then you relax into that state, and you can have liberation in the Sambhogakaya. But if you don't know what it is, and you think, whoa, what's this? That turning back into yourself, you move on. And then you find yourself moving towards rebirth. And if you recognize what that is, then you can enter into the world in the Nirmanakaya form. But if you don't recognize what it is, your karma just spirals you off somewhere else. And then you begin with a new identity. And you start all over again. And what you bring from your previous life is your karma, which includes your developed capacity for awareness. And you see that with small children. You see that some children get very turned in on themselves. You know, they just cook, and you don't say, oh sweetie, just take it easy. And other kids are just happy and laughing, and they fall over and they look at the Ladlanini and and others are whining, you know, these gurney little kids. And it's very sad, isn't it? Because you can see that it's all too real. And you want to say, sweetie, just, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. But if mum's not very able to do that and the child finds it difficult, then you see how the karma starts cooking. And then the child starts to become wary, the world's a bit dangerous, and so they become a bit frightened and avoidant. And then of course when you get avoid situations, you feel lonely inside. And you look at the other kids and they seem to do it, and you think, well, if they can do it, why can't I do it? There must be something wrong with me. And you start to cook up these very lonely little stories. That's how karma manifests. So old age, sickness and death is a reminder, don't leave this life empty-handed. Because your house won't go with you, your body won't go with you, your possessions won't go with you, your collection of DVDs won't go with you, you know, the number of sexual partners you've had won't go with you, nothing will go with you, it's all be gone. So what can go with you? Only the Dharma and the Karma. And if it's mainly Karma and not very much Dharma, not so good. If it's mainly Dharma and not so much Karma, not so bad. So these are the 4 thoughts that turn the mind from samsara. That is to say that we should use them like wedges to interrupt and to open up a little gap in our normal immersion into the habitual formations of our lives. It's very important to try to do that, not to take things for granted. Because certainly from the point of view of Dzogchen, the only thing which is granted is awareness. Only the Buddha nature is unborn, is just there. Everything else is arising and passing, and therefore is prone to be woven into constructs. So if you take constructs for granted, now at the moment the British economy is not so bad. We're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Things seem quite safe. But there are plenty of people still alive who remember the Second World War. And it didn't seem like that. And at certain periods in the Second World War, it was very, very uncertain what would happen. 1939, 1940, the outcome of the war was very, very uncertain. The Third Reich could have been successful. America was not very willing to be involved. And if that had happened, the future that we have could have been very different. And especially if the Americans had not got involved and Stalin had come in, then maybe Stalin's armies would have marched right through Germany, into Belgium, into France, and into Britain. Lots of things can happen. That is to say, what we take for granted, our kind of democracy, economic balance, and so on, is very, very fragile. China is arising as this incredible economic power, getting more and more of the raw resources in the world. We don't know what will happen. And that's the important thing. We don't know. So taking our security for granted is a way of falling asleep. These 4 thoughts are not designed to make you anxious and upset. The lever is not to hit yourself on the head with. It's just to make you reflect. Oh, for the moment things are like this, but I need to make use of this opportunity. When times are good, you should save and put some money in the bank. When times are hard, you will not have the resources to put money in the bank. When you are healthy and have energy, then you should practice the Dharma. But many people wait till they are tired and sick and then practice the Dharma. And then it's a little bit too late. That's the important thing. So the view means, okay, I really accept this. This world is always changing. The patterns I experience are contingent, that is to say they're dependent on many different factors, most of which are not at all in my control. For the moment things are good, but they can easily change, and I anyway will have to leave this body and go wandering lone hither and thither like a leaf in the autumn wind. What should I do? Luckily we meet the Dharma, and they say, practice wisdom and compassion. Is this going to get you into some terrible cult? Are you going to be asked to do some dreadful things? Not really. Mainly you'll be asked to be kind to yourself and kind to other people. You don't have to do anything funny. You don't have to wear any particular funny clothes. You don't have to go any special secret handshakes. You don't need to do anything peculiar except find out who you actually are. There is a cost to that though, because I think it's not insulting to say that we live in a zombie world. The zombies are people who are wandering around not quite there. That is how we are. But as soon as we start to do the meditation, we realize how zombied we are. The more you wake up, the more you realize how bad samsara is. When the Buddha explained the nature of suffering, he said there are different kinds of suffering. These are organized in different schools in different ways, but generally they say that there are 3 kinds of suffering. There's this kind of gross suffering, which is bad things happening to you. Then there is the suffering of change, where good things become bad, but also when bad things become good. When people win the pools, when they win the lottery. Wonderful luck, but it often makes their life go very bad because it's so disturbing. But the third form of suffering is a very subtle suffering. And it's said that, you know, when you have a grain of sand on the palm of your hand, or a hair on the palm of your hand, you can hardly feel it. But if it goes in your eye, then you would certainly feel it. And for the Buddha, he feels this all the time. This is why the Buddha's heart is so full of compassion, because he really sees. Everybody wants happiness, but they do nothing to make that happiness. You think, I live in London, and all these young people who are carrying knives now, and the anxiety that this brings in their mums and their dads and so on. It's awful. It's awful. The kids want to be safe, but they think the only way to protect myself is to defend myself. But the statistics show that you're more likely to be involved in a knife fight if you're carrying a knife. But you can see why that happens. People want to make their lives secure, but the way they go about it provokes the other person into more violence. So one of the beautiful things about Dharma is it gives us many useful and subtle methods for living in the world in the easiest possible way. Okay, shall we do another short meditation before we break for lunch? So we do this 3-hour practice. Open into the space and allow whatever comes to come. Sala